Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film Flux Gourmet. It's a Shudder exclusive and it's coming to Shudder on Thursday, September 15th. So this is a no spoiler review for that reason. So anyway, this one was written and directed by Peter Strickland, who also directed and wrote Catalin Varga, The Duke of Burgundy, the film that buys cinema. Oh, sorry, the film that buys the cinema, and In Fabric, which, by the way, I've heard pretty good things about In Fabric and kind of wanted to check it out. Just so people know, this film is in English, Greek, and German. The majority of the time it's in English, but there are also Greek and German subtitled portions. Well, I mean, it's not subtitled in Greek and German. It's Greek and German language, then subtitled in English. Had to make sure I get that right. Don't want to confuse anyone on that. So, if you're not a big subtitle fan, there is some reading involved, but it's not a crazy amount. Again, this is a Shudder exclusive coming Thursday, September 15th. Quick synopsis. I don't want to give too much away. I never want to give too much away, so pretty quick. It's a weird film. So it's a little bit hard to give a synopsis of it, and it is going to be brief for that reason too. But it's basically about a food collective. No, I think they call it a culinary collective is what it is. They're very focused on food, but they're not just focused on food in a normal sense. They're focused on kind of like integrating food into life in a very different way. And that's kind of all I'm going to say about that. Well, I'll give a little bit more about it that doesn't really give much of the events away, but a lot of focus on food, a lot of talk about food, a lot of actual scenes with food, but then there's a lot of performance art involved with it as well that focuses around food. So there's a lot being said here about food. So it's about this culinary collective, all the people in this culinary collective, and a guy who's basically like a writer who they want there to document their collective. Which actually, I'm going to be honest, it seems more like cult-ish, and I think the writer-director actually probably took some things from cults that have actually existed, or still do, because there's always cults, basically. You can always trick people into being in cults at any time in history, apparently. But, yeah, so there's a lot of that kind of gets worked into there. But that's basically all the synopsis. I mean, it's about the interactions of these characters, and, yeah, that's what it is. It's definitely a start that makes you wonder what this film is ultimately about. And honestly, the entire time you're watching it, you may still be wondering, what is this film about? And then when you finish the film, you may be wondering, what is this film about? It's very kind of cryptic in what it's trying to say. When it's subtext, it is very subtext. You have to really take a lot of time to kind of pull something out of it. I have a theory on what the subtext in it is that I'll talk about at the end, but I'm not 100% if that's even what the filmmaker was going for, because it seems so weird and all over the place and cryptic. It's just very, very cryptic. But it's odd. All the characters feel very stuffy and arrogant. So if you're not into that type of character, they're all very stuffy and arrogant. Other than, I mean, the writer is probably the most relatable or the most interesting character that you can actually like view in a positive light and kind of like attach yourself to in a sense. But for the most part, the characters are not written in a way that you're going to care about them all that much. So I think that's kind of a problem, just because when you're watching a film, you want to actually kind of feel more invested in the events and what's going on. You're just more of an observer with some crappy personality people. Like, I didn't actually find myself liking really anyone in the film, and that just kind of creates a situation where you're just like, I don't really care that much what happens. If someone ends up getting killed or something, I don't really care at all. Like, there's no stakes. It doesn't feel like you as an audience member are invested and have any sort of stake in the film. Pun not intended, actually, but yeah. So I don't really think the characters were well written for that reason. And also, if you don't like people talking in a very arrogant, stuffy way, high concept about a lot of things with words that may just go over people's heads because of the way that sentences get strung together. Like, it's just arrogant is the best way I can put it. The main character starts talking about farts a lot, So that feels a bit weird and makes you think that the film isn't very serious. But it does take itself seriously, which is weird because it is very odd and some of the stuff can be viewed as kind of funny. So that may have been one of the points that the filmmaker was trying to get to, is like our societal relationship with food and how it is one particular way, but what if we kind of, did exercises where we looked at having different relationships with food in different ways. And you'll see what that means if you watch the film. There is a lot of voice over at times that tends to get excessive when it's happening. I don't say that just because it's subtitled at those points. I say that because it seems like it's the same thing kind of being said a bit over and over. It doesn't add a whole lot to the film, honestly. And in general, I will say the film is almost 2 hours long. It's an hour and 51 minutes with the credits, and it feels insanely long. There's a lot of retread that goes on in the film. It doesn't really feel like the film goes much of anywhere at all. Where you start with the film, it feels like you're just about in the same place at the end, even though some things do change. So there is some progression, but for the most part, you feel like you don't really go anywhere throughout the entirety of the film. Like, not a whole lot happens. I ended the film and was kind of like, so what? Like, what's the point? Like, so what? Like, make me feel like this mattered. Like, make me feel that this almost 2 hours of my life wasn't totally wasted by watching this. Now, I say that to also say that I know there will be people out there who really like this film. I obviously wasn't a fan of it, mainly because it is overly long. It is very overly long. Because, like I said, they just keep retreading the same things. Characters keep having the same type of interactions. Characters keep having the same type of conversations. This should have been cut down by at least 40 minutes. At least 40 minutes, potentially more. Like, there is not much to the story itself. Subtextually, maybe, but it's also kind of hard to figure out. There's a slight conflict that's introduced about 20 minutes into the film, and that one makes you wonder if it will escalate. It does eventually, but man, it takes forever for that to happen. Forever. So in between, you kind of forget about what was going on. So you lose any sort of interest or tension that goes on. And that's one of the big things. I found this film to be boring. Like, pretty boring. There's an interesting use of musique concrète in the film. For anyone who's not familiar with what musique concrète is, it's just basically using using normal sounds or sounds from your environment, basically, or everyday life, not instruments, to compose music. So that is interesting. I did find that, and the way they did it and with what, I thought was very interesting. There is a lot of performance art moments. So if you're not into that, ... If you don't like performance art type stuff, there's a lot of performance art going into this, and that the big thing is this. A lot of people don't like performance art. They find it very odd. It seems a lot of the times that performance art is very personal, and usually personal to the person who's doing it, the person who conceptualized it. So that's the way this film feels to me, for the most part. And I think that may be a point, and I'll talk about that at the end, though. There are some terms created by this film that seem kind of funny, but make sense within the context of the actual story. That's, again, going back to what I was talking about, like some certain words kind of being strung together that you haven't really heard them strung together before, but if you think about it in the context of the film, you're like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it makes sense what they're talking about, but first time I'm hearing of a concept like this. It's very artistically shot. Very cool use of colors. So it looks very good from a directorial standpoint, cinematography standpoint, from an acting standpoint. The cast did an outstanding job with this. The acting is wonderful. So well lit. The music is, for the most part, pretty good, but it gets really heavy-handed at times and needed to really be toned down at certain moments. For the most part, the composition of the music is quite good. And usually it's used, sparingly enough, but all the technical stuff is really good. It's just, I don't think the story was there. I think it's way too long, that type of stuff. Character relationships are complicated, to say the least. They're very complicated, but unfortunately, you learn that they're complicated and in what ways they're complicated, and then it doesn't really go much further than that. You're just kind of like, oh, okay, we learned some stuff that doesn't really matter that much in the end. So it seems like filler. There's a lot that seems like filler in this. There's a relatively strong sexual component that comes into the film in an interesting way, I will say. I'm sure they'll have some people just being like, oh, I don't know how to feel about this right now. It becomes pretty hard to see when and where the horror will show up in this film. And the horror doesn't actually even show up in this film until within the last 10 minutes of it. So would I really even call this a horror film? No, not at all. I don't think this is a horror film. Some people may make an argument of that, but I don't. I mean, there's a very slight horror element to it. I don't think it's a horror film. Now, that's not to say that it's a problem that it's on Shudder, because Shudder has been known to put some non-horror films on their service. But it's just, people will go in with a mindset of being like, I'm going to watch this horror film because it's on Shudder. But I don't really think this is a horror film, to be honest. It really isn't. It doesn't play like that. And like I said, the only actual kind of horror stuff is within the last 10 minutes. Other than that, there's like none of it. Same stuff keeps getting retread over and over and over. At no point is any character believable, although the performances are great. Like, what they were supposed to be character-wise, I think the actors nailed it. But the characters, how they were written, I think they should have been done a different way. Like I said, you can't relate to anyone. You don't really care about anyone. They just seem kind of alien in a way, although that may have been a point. Very weird concept. I've said weird a lot. I'm going to say it again. This movie is so weird. Like I said, it'll find its fan base. It'll find people who actually like it. That's not me. Definitely not me. And it's way too long. I'm going to say it again. It is way, 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 way too long of a film. There's no reason for it to be an hour and 51 minutes, in my opinion. Okay, so here's my theory on what this is all about in the end. I think the main point is potentially about being an artist and how you put your entire self into your craft. It comes with lots of ups and downs, and you always have people who just don't get what you're trying to achieve and judge you for it. So, if that is correct, then what I'm doing right now is proving the concept of the film. Judging this art that someone has put all of themselves into. So for that reason, it is important to keep those types of things in mind. And I learned, well, I didn't learn, I kind of knew that, but I took that lesson from the film of this is what they were trying to say. Knew that when I did this review, I was going to say I don't like the film, but that actually potentially plays into the whole point of the film. So is there some genius in that? Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's some genius in it. But it's kind of similar to the film Titane by Julia Ducournau. Conceptually, very well done. Although this one I wouldn't say is nearly as well done conceptually as Titane, but conceptually well done. But as a film to watch and be entertained by, misses the mark a lot. So, but maybe some people will really be into that, and I would love to hear from those people. So go ahead and put in the comments, like it, hate it, in between. Really interested on different takes. Interested to hear what other people got out of this, because maybe I'm missing something that I shouldn't have missed, and you can let me know that. So, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm gonna give it 2 stars, because technically there's so many good things going on with the film that I can't dock it further than down to 2 stars. So it's just not for me. I just think there's problems, but there's a lot of good stuff there too. But anyway, those are my feelings. Please do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I appreciate that. If you do, keeps me motivated, keeps me putting these videos out, and it's really quick and easy for you to do it. Literally takes a second. Also hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point, so I'm putting in work. Regardless though, thanks for taking your time to watch this particular video, and until next time, keep it brutal.